Gregory Preston came before the court seeking justice under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Illinois Minimum Wage Law, and the Illinois Wage Payment and Collection Act. He was represented by his attorney, JAC A, COTIGUALA, who presented evidence showing an unjustified lack of payment for the work done in his state. With the help of Mr. COTIGUALA, Mr. Preston had Damien Limited, the employer in question, brought to justice. The court ultimately ruled in favor of Mr. Preston and, with his legal guidance, sent a signal to all employers that they must follow the labor standards set out by the law. The court was called to action to hear the grievances of the plaintiff, who was suing under the FLSA, Count I, for rights under the IMWL and ILCS, Counts 2 and 3 respectively. It was the court's original jurisdiction to hear this case based on 28 U.S.C. 1331 and its supplemental jurisdiction to hear those other claims, as they arose from the same case and controversy. The court was prepared to listen and ultimately decide whether the plaintiff was maliciously, or in some way, wronged by the FLSA and other related laws which had been breached. It was now the court's responsibility to decide the outcome. The judge entered the courtroom, looking around to assess the capacity of the crowd. The plaintiff had filled the courtroom, and it was clear that this case was of paramount importance. Everyone had come to hear the opening statements of the case, in which the plaintiff accused the defendants, R. Kelly Touring, Inc. and Bass Productions Limited, as well as defendant Robert Kelly, of negligence. The lawyers began to make their arguments. The plaintiff argued that the venue was proper in this court due to a substantial part of the events having occurred there, and that the defendants met the requirements for jurisdiction. Per 28 U.S.C. 1391, within the jurisdiction of the Northern District of Illinois Eastern Division. After both parties had finished their opening arguments, the judge turned to the jury, ready to hear their verdict. There was a hush in the courthouse, and everyone was waiting for the verdict to be delivered. All eyes were on the jury. After a few moments of anticipation, they delivered the verdict, deciding in the favor of the plaintiff. The defendants had been found guilty. The judge announced the verdict, and the courtroom erupted with noise. The accused could be seen standing expressionless, accepting the consequences of their actions. Gregory Preston had always been a fan of R. Kelly, and had been counting down the days until Kelly's tour of Chicago. He was eagerly awaiting the chance to catch one of the local appearances from his favorite artist. So when he heard that R. Kelly Touring, Inc. and Bass Productions Limited were teaming up to organize a series of concerts in the city, he was overjoyed. Knowing that both companies were incorporated and registered in the same state as him, and that Robert Kelly was in residence close by, Gregory couldn't contain his excitement. He purchased tickets as soon as they became available, and started counting down again, this time to the actual days of the tour. He ended up being one of the first to arrive at each of the scheduled concerts, and was able to enjoy the amazing experience of the live music and atmosphere. It was a tour that Gregory would never forget, and he couldn't be more thankful for the chance to witness it from such a close distance. Gregory Preston had put in long hours on the soundboards for R. Kelly Touring, Inc. and Bass Productions Limited, eagerly working to create the perfect soundscape for Robert Kelly's concerts. Unbeknownst to him, they were viewed as employers as defined by the FLSA. After working hard on the project for months, Gregory approached them for his due compensation. To his dismay, he was told he would not be paid the regular wage. Rather, he would receive far less than what was deserved. Feeling violated and distraught, Gregory filed a FLSA complaint against all three defendants. He fought fervently and passionately against what he perceived as blatant exploitation. With his rights as an employee infringed upon, he argued in court that all three defendants ought to pay him a fair wage for the time and energy expended during his work. With support from peers and allies, Gregory was able to make a strong enough case that the judge ultimately deemed in his favor. Even though the fight was long and grueling, Gregory was determined to see it through until the very end. Now, justice is finally being done, and he can recover the proper wages he so richly deserves. Plaintiff worked diligently during the time he was employed at R. Kelly's home from August the 13th to September the 16th, 2006, faithfully being paid $450 per week. Furthermore, as R. Kelly traveled for performances. Plaintiff was often tasked with fulfilling duties while Mr. Kelly was out of town. In one remarkable week, Plaintiff worked an astonishing 100 hours for his employer. Despite his efforts and dedication, Plaintiff was never paid for his time and work while Mr. Kelly was touring. Plaintiff was employed by R. Kelly to help with the artist tour between February 26, 2006 and March 30, 2006. For his duties, Plaintiff was promised a salary of $450 each week. Unfortunately, from January 7, 2006 to March 15, 2008, Plaintiff was never paid the wages he deserved, as he was not given 1.5 times his regular rate of pay for all hours worked beyond 40. Violating the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. What's more, defendants failed to post notices in a conspicuous and accessible place for the duration of his employment. Explaining the FLSA and its criteria, Gregory Preston had never expected to end up here, in court due to the defendant's willful violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Preston knew he was entitled to back wages and liquidated damages, but the amount was unknown to him. Preston was determined, though, to fight for what he deserved and held on to that strength as he waited for the court's decision. The court had the payroll records of the defendants that Preston could use to prove the arrears, a decision that would be crucial to the claim he had brought against R. Kelly Touring, Inc., Bass Productions Limited, and Robert Kelly individually. Gregory looked around the chamber, nodding to himself. He knew he had done all he could. After a long hearing, the court gave its verdict. Preston was finally awarded the back wages and liquidated damages that he deserved. It was a long and hard-fought victory, but justice had prevailed in the end. John had struggles for the past few years like many others. He worked as hard as he could, but he had seen little return from his efforts. That all changed for him on January 7, 2006, when he sued his employer, hoping to get the back wages and other relief to which he was entitled. John hoped to receive back wages, interest on those wages, liquidated damages, reasonable attorney's fees, and any other relief deemed appropriate by the court. He was pleased that his legal representation was able to get him these things as he was having trouble paying his bills. In the end, John was glad to have realized his rights, and was pleased with the positive outcome of his lawsuit. He was relieved that all the hard work and time spent fighting for his cause had paid off. His sense of justice was restored, and he moved on with life knowing that his rights would be upheld. Gregory Preston filed a complaint against R. Kelly Touring, Inc., Bass Productions, Limited, and Robert Kelly for allegedly violating the Illinois minimum wage law. He alleged that the defendants were employers, as defined by the law, and that they weren't paying him the required minimum wage. He reasserted the paragraphs 10 through 18 from Count I, claiming that the defendants had violated the IMWL. He asked the court to take legal action against them for their violation of the law. Gregory Preston had worked for defendants for years. Despite his countless hours of extra work, he had never been properly compensated for his overtime. Every week he would work more than 40 hours, but he was never paid at the rate of time and a half. He decided to take matters into his own hands, and filed a lawsuit against his employers for their negligence in following the IMWL. After a long legal battle, they finally acknowledged their wrongdoing, and awarded him the wages he had rightly earned. And Preston received more money than he had ever thought possible. He thanked his attorney for her hard work, and vowed to never again let a corporation get away with not paying him what he deserved. Plaintiff filed a lawsuit alleging they were unfairly being denied proper wages. According to court documents, plaintiff claimed they were not paid at a regular rate of pay equal to or exceeding the minimum wage for all hours worked between January 7, 2006 and March 15, 2008. Additionally, plaintiff stated that they were not paid time and a half their regular wages for all hours worked in excess of 40 hours in a week in violation of the Illinois minimum wage law, IMWL. The books and records of the defendants were highly relevant to the case, as they are supposed to provide information detailing the number of hours worked by the plaintiff. However, due to the defendant's failure to pay the plaintiff according to the IMWL, these records were seen as a crucial piece of evidence. After much deliberation, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, with the defendants being ordered to pay compensation for all unpaid wages, as per the IMWL. The plaintiff had worked for the defendants for months, blissfully unaware that they had yet to post statutorily required notices in or around the premises where plaintiff was employed. This notice was intended to explain or summarize the Illinois minimum wage law. On behalf of the plaintiffs, the defect in compliance of the law was noticed and penalized, causing the plaintiff injury. Unaware of the critical information provided by the notice, the plaintiff suffered irreversible damages. Had the defendants paid attention to the proper course of action, they could have saved the plaintiff from such harm. Gregory Preston had a clear claim against his former employer for unpaid back wages, but the company failed to respond in kind. As a result, he took them to court. He sought recovery of the wages he was owed pursuant to the Illinois minimum wage law, and asked the court to enter a judgment in his favor. He also requested prejudgment interest on the back wages, and damages at the rate of 2% per month on the underpayments in accordance with the state's wage laws. After the evidence was heard and the verdict rendered, the court judged in his favor. Gregory was glad to receive the compensation he deserved. It all started on April 10, 2009. Plaintiff demanded payment of a staggering $40, $217.50 from defendants' attorneys. But how did he become aware of such an incomprehensible amount? The exact amount of deductions from his pay was not known by him. That's when he realized the only way to know the real figure was to take a peek into defendants' payroll records, as it will certainly display the amount. It was quite a gamble, but plaintiff had faith, and sure enough, he made quite a discovery. The records revealed that the exact amount plaintiff demanded had been deducted from his pay. He was now prepared to pursue a rightful claim for the return of his money. The parties have come together in order to resolve the matter that has been at hand between them. All matters that had been in dispute have been contained within the agreement presented to the court for review and approval. After the court reviewing the agreement and deeming it fair for all parties involved, the parties will then stipulate to the dismissal of the case with prejudice. This means that the case will not be able to be brought up in the court again in the future. Both parties will be responsible for bearing their own costs and attorney's fees. With all matters now settled and agreed upon, the court will enter an order of dismissal.